Oh, that's absolutely lovely. Like, it's so good to feel it, no? Like, if you can make HR nervous, like, that's the feeling, like, I always wanted, but yeah.
Don't worry, we give it back in style.
Shit. I think I'll just connect it with, I think HRs are God. Like, though you have said it, like, they definitely don't deserve to be mother, but like, I see that happening, like, generally at the appraisal time. Have you ever organized or made Rangoli? This has to be answered. Hi everyone. Welcome to you all to the first episode of Candid by Apna. This whole conversation, this podcast will be all about CHROs, founders, where they'll be talking about their personal experiences, sharing life advices, and maybe I'll be putting them in a situation as well. But today we have a very interesting guest as well. And for our first episode, we have Vikrant Gupta, who's a CHRO at Apna. He's been a mentor, guide, friend, and a very dear colleague. So welcome Vikrant for this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's lovely. This is my first podcast, so I'm looking forward to it.
So I know Vikrant, this is your first podcast and generally HRs are not nervous. How nervous are you for this conversation?
Well, given that it's a Friday night, 8:30, super excited, but yes, a little bit nervous. As I said, this is the first podcast, but also excited in the same breath. Looking forward to having the conversation. The nervousness will keep me on my feet.
Oh, that's absolutely lovely. Like, it's so good to feel it, no? Like, if you can make HR nervous, like, that's the feeling, like, I always wanted, but yeah.
Don't worry, we give it back in style.
Shit. So, Vikrant, like, talking about your career, you have had I think, career almost my age. And you joined L&T. Now you are a CHRO at Apna. One thing that hasn't changed in your professional life?
Oh, that's a deep question. You're right. It's 28 years now in HR.
Wow.
So just about probably the oldest person or the most experienced person at Apna. But love the energy here with the youngsters that bring in new thoughts and stuff, right? But I think over the last 28 years, what's been consistent with me professionally has been, I think, staying anchored and understanding how businesses operate. Though I've been an HR person all my life, but I've always tried to understand wherever I worked, how is money made? How do the economics work? I've always tried to understand the P&L because that has helped me anchor and shape my HR initiatives, the function to be in tune with what the organization needs. So I think that's been something that I'm a huge advocate for and has been an absolute consistent part of my life as I've grown professionally.
That's very interesting because generally I've never heard an HR getting very interested in the P&L or maybe making their routine around business, because it's always, what we have heard is, it's always about people. And that's a very interesting point. One thing that has changed completely from L&T to like being again at Apna.
Well, a lot of things that have changed.
Okay.
One, obviously, I've had a little less hair than what I used to have earlier. But I think I have evolved as a human being. I think fundamentally 2 or 3 things that I know has changed in me. One, I used to be walking around with guns in my pocket, very aggressive, hardcore, objective-driven go-getter, and probably wouldn't have cared of the dead body that I was leaving behind or the relationships I was burning. I think that fundamentally has changed. I think for me, relationships are singularly more important, especially in workplaces where we need to get people together to work. So I think that's fundamentally shifted. 2, I think I've also now started to judge people less. I think my own personal experiences have taught me that everybody has a story. And until you've really understood and walked the shoes of the individual, we don't have the right to be judgmental. So I've really chosen to practice the art of suspending judgment.
Wow.
And that's helped me a lot. And I think the third thing is I've started to take myself a little less seriously, right? So take yourself a little more, lightly enjoy life. You only have one. So trying to enjoy life a little bit more with whatever we all have. So those are the three fundamental shifts that have happened to me.
I'll just stick to the third one. Like, should I take my CHRO seriously or not?
Oh, absolutely, you should, in a light way.
But very interestingly, like in a very short span, like whatever career I've had, like I've seen HRs acting like mothers, like literally, because I think they care for the organization, they talk to people, they do the pulse check, they play very different roles. Like I've seen personally, like they will ensure the motivation game is strong, they'll ensure the culture game is strong, they'll ensure like if something is going wrong, you just report it to the HR, and HR knows it all. And but where do you draw the line? Like, and where do you see that line has to be drawn? Because I think there is no boundary when you are an HR.
Very interesting question. So let me, will be a little longish response, but I think one, you put the function in a pedestal, which I don't think it deserves, right? Fundamental philosophy is, as they say, God couldn't be everywhere, so they had mothers. I don't think HR deserves, or anybody for that matter, deserves that pedestal. Having said that, I think a lot of what I've heard from you now around HR is really not an HR function.
Okay.
It is for every leader, every individual, right? It's not HR's prerogative to only to care for the organization. It's not only HR's prerogative to care for the organization. It's not HR's prerogative to drive culture alone, right? I think what HR is able to do is being able to join the dots. The difference between, I would say, successful HR professionals and the ones who are going to get there is the ability to join the dots, look at different pieces of the organization and see if we can bring in the human element as you're driving business and hard numbers, right? So yes, from that perspective, I would definitely say this is a function which is front and center. The reason is everything else is in PowerPoints and Excel sheet. If you don't have the right talent, if you don't develop the right talent, if you don't invest in the right talent, if you don't grow the right talent, right? I can have the best strategy, but if I don't have the people to make it real, it's just a piece of paper. And HR does play a role. We are conditioned and trained to do that a little better, but doesn't mean we are the best at it. I think our ability or our strength really comes in if I can replicate that to the organization. So can I pass that? Can I train managers? Can I teach them? Can I coach them to do a better job of all that you said? And I think if that happens, then it just multiplies and the organization is probably in a much better place. So yes, thank you for all the credit, but I think it's a job that we have to do, and I probably think we're a little bit more conditioned to it, but I still won't put the HR or the function at the pedestal where you gave it as a mother, right?
I think I'll just connect it with, I think HRs are God. Like, though you have said it, like, they definitely don't deserve to be mother. But, like, I see that happening, like, generally at the appraisal time. Like, they're considered to be God, like, being very honest here. But I know it's a very personal question. And what's the one most absurd thing, like, you have been asked to do when in an organization as an HR?
Absurd thing in an organization as an HR. You laugh your guts out, but at some point I was responsible to ensure that the toilet was constructed and clean.
Okay.
We were actually walking in to seeing if the toilet was being made well, if the slope was okay or not, and making sure that, there were, the soap and all the other paraphernalia that goes in. So yes, that was part of my job description at some point very, very early in the career. But qualified, it was also the fact that we were starting up a company, right, in Bangalore itself. So it was part of the agenda of bringing the company along. So,
but it's beautiful, like, because when you're associated at such a, and when you're doing such a job, like, I think this is particularly an admin job to do, and you're literally playing very different roles. And as an HR, I think people expect that you do every kind of role, you play that function very critically, and you are very close to people as well. And again, I'm asking a very serious question here. And I've never seen that. Like, I've always seen founders being asked this question, thought leaders being asked this question, like, how do they see India? How do they see the people of India? I've never seen in newspapers or anywhere, like, okay, what do CHROs think about, or what does the HR community think about the India? Like, and they are the most critical people, I will say, like, because I think always we are conditioned in a way like, let's go to a founder or a CEO, like, because their word or their value would be better. But I think it's always there in my mind, and I would want to know your view. How do you see India?
Sure.
And as a CHRO?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I would like to just add and clarify, right? We have a human resource ministry, right, which is responsible for development of human resources in the country, right? That itself should make us question as to why you don't have more CHRO on the platform, right? I think there's a couple of things. So one, before I answer the question of where I see India, I just think it's a little bit of a stereotype. Now the function has evolved and changed over the last 7, 10, 15 years. You have a lot of CEOs actually coming out of the CHRO function or the CHRO position, right? And HR does have a seat on the table now. I think gone are the days when we used to talk about why or when, whether they're effective. Some are, some may not be as effective, but we do have a seat on the table as a community, right? And that's something that's very, very proud of. Back to your question on where I see as an HR professional the country, I think...
I'll just add to it. How do you see India in the next 10 years?
Sure. I think next 10 years, I think we're at a very interesting phase, personally. From an HR standpoint, if I were to put on the HR glasses and lens, I think a very, very interesting phase. There's a workforce that's changing. The generation that's coming in is very different from the generations like us who are holding positions. There is gaps. The motivation and drivers are very different. The generation coming in is far more hungry, well-connected to the global world, more global in their thinking and approach as well. There is enormous opportunity for growth, and especially from a talent perspective. We talk about India in the context of, the 4 metropolitan cities and maybe a handful of other cities, but the real India is out there in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and that's where you will see all the explosive growth happening. That is where the untapped potential of the country is. You've seen and heard about our country's policies around manufacturing, right? It's just going to be an explosive growth in the next 5-10 years. I think fundamentally, we will see a lot of growth. Fundamentally, we will see a lot of change in how we learn, how we build skills, how we drive employability. And these are, obviously, if we are, in tune with what the government is doing, what's happening in the startup ecosystem, it's all just science to say that lots that's going to change. And how we used to learn, how we used to do things is definitely being pushed to the limits given the innovation that some of these startups are bringing in, the new entrepreneur generation is bringing in, challenging really every single way. And I think that's beautiful, because only when you challenge do you get better outcomes, creative outcomes, and outcomes that probably vault you to the next level. So I think India is poised for some explosive stuff. We just put successfully Chandrayaan-3 on the moon, right? And guess what? We didn't have the most premier educated, institute alumnus in the team. And I'm not saying this with a bias, but I'm saying talent is there in the country and not just restricted to either tier 1 cities or tier 1 colleges. We just need to find a way to explore and exploit that, and that's going to be India's magic moment.
Awesome. I think fairly well answered. But I'll stick to one point what you said about the premium institutes and everything. And as a HR, what's more important to you, skills or education?
Good question. I don't think we live in the era of where we have the flexibility of or, right? You don't say cost or quality. You don't say speed or quality, right? I think we moved away from that or to an and. It is speed and quality, right? Similarly, I would say it is education and skills, right? Just because you're educated or you had the privilege to go to some of the best schools or the education institutes in the country doesn't mean that you're best skilled to do a job. Doesn't mean you're the most capable person. You still have to keep honing it, growing it, right? So I would say education, yes. And when I say education, I don't necessarily mean a college degree. Not everybody in the country today, and I hope it does happen that everybody has access to education. We will get there soon. But I think education at a base level, where you're able to make judgment calls is important. Beyond that, I do think people need to grow, hone skills and capabilities for them to keep progressing.
Wow. Vikrant, I'll put you in a situation now, like, because since again, it's a very interesting question that I have in mind is, uh, you are interviewing three very interesting candidates.
Okay.
And the first one is Narendra Modi.
Then
And
fantastic. This is where Friday night gets spiced up.
yeah, what would be that one question like you will ask Narendra Modi for the job
Go.
as an HR?
As an HR person asking Narendra Modi ji.
Yeah.
Well, I think if he's applying for a job, I would ask him, his knowledge and depth on succession planning, and how would he do succession planning for his own role, for example.
All right. The second would be Virat Kohli.
Virat Kohli. Look, personally, I'm very keen to know when he's going to make his 100th century. So that is the question I would ask him. But I think genuinely, I admire the guy, and I think what I would ask him is, how has he been able to tame, his aggression, which is inherently who he is, and keep it under control after some of the infamous incidents? And is that because of fatherhood, or has he generally practiced something? I'm very keen to understand that.
Very, very intense question, I guess. Like the third is like, I think most interesting figure, Shahrukh Khan.
Shahrukh Khan. Well, I think I'll ask him what is the procedure to get adopted by him. To me, that would be
Like
it.
he's looking out for a job. Vikrant, like you need
Yeah, like if Shahrukh Khan comes looking for a job, hey buddy, adopt me. I'm happy with whatever little space you give me in one. I might quit my job if he adopts me. So
Very interesting. Vikrant, in your whole work experience, which has been the most interesting interview
interesting interview, like I've given or I've.
you have taken?
Oh, this one. This one is cool. This one is very interesting. I just remember very vividly. Again, I'm not going to name the organization, but it was in Bangalore, and we were interviewing. It was a walk-in, and I have this person walking in with a bag and a lunch box sort of a thing, right?
Okay.
And we of course have the conversation. We're chatting up, and obviously, growing up is very early in my career, and I was asking him, "Hey, what are your hobbies?" Right? And this person said cooking. And I said, really? It seemed like a 23, 24-year-old person. And I think I made the mistake of asking him, I don't believe you. He actually opened his lunchbox in the interview room, put it up and said, this is all that I've made. Now you need to have this. And you tell me whether it's good or not, whether I'm lying or not.
Wow.
That just threw me off the guard. We, of course, hired him because he was convincing. So that was, one of the most memorable moments. I got free lunch as well. And the food was good.
Thank God he got hired. Like, since again, one very interesting question again, which is coming to my mind, and in your 28 years of experience, have you ever organized or made Rangoli? This has to be answered like once for all. Like, has Vikrant Gupta has been ever part of any Rangoli competition or organized, or have you done it like yourself?
I've always been blessed with a brilliant team, right? I've always had a team that's always been super engaged, energized, and super excited to bring about fun and camaraderie, within the organization. So yes, we've had many Rangolis organized in my charter or under my span. Unfortunately, I could not draw a straight line with a ruler. So, good for the teams that I wasn't part of it. But yes, we've been part of it, and we've had enormous amount of fun. And by the way, there is an enormous amount of talent in the country to make Rangoli. Some of the designs that I've seen are just massive. If you ever walked into a Mercedes-Benz office on a festive day, you would see their logo being made to perfection by, some of these folks. It's just amazing.
Another question, Vikrant, that comes to my mind is like, what's your favorite line apart from "I'll get back to you"? Oh yeah,
Chill karo.
wow. Okay,
Kuch nahi bigdega.
like I hope you mean I hope you mean it. Like,
Yeah, I'll get back to you. That's our defense mechanism. When you start attacking, HR professionals, yep, I'll get back to you.
Since we're talking about interviews, HRs, so this was actually one of the questions that was given to me by a colleague, and he was very curious to know कि HR का HR round कैसे होता है?
सब बकवास होता है.
Because HR knows it all, like
ये भी बकवास है. HR does not know it all. I wish they did, right? I wish they did. I would be betting on the next horse to win if you know it all. Look, I mean, there's no difference. I mean, I think we look for the same stuff that we would look for anybody else if you would be interviewing for a marketing person, for that matter. So I think we look for skills. I think we look for demonstrated capability and the attitude that we need. No difference whatsoever. I think personally, I am a huge fan of hiring for attitude. So at least when I interview, I look for the right attitude, the right mindset, because that solves for everything. If you have the right mindset, you have the right attitude, you have a good person at hand. So when I interview, at least I look for those. But I don't think there's anything different that we would look for in an HR interview. Imagine two people just, ज्ञान बांट रहे हैं एक दूसरे को. It doesn't really work.
But Vikrant, how do you test for attitude?
Look, there is no science to it. I mean, again, these are all personal point of views. I'm sure there are researchers who would say a lot of things. There are aptitude tests available who say, but for me, it comes out. I mean, your your life journey and how you dealt with what life has thrown at you, right? Talks a lot about your attitude. None of us can stand up here and say you've not had tough times, right? But I'm sure all of us would have dealt with our tough times very differently. Some very positively, some not so positively. And I think that's attitude. Everybody's dealt with a different hand. But what do you make out of that is really attitude. So if you're able to understand the situations that individuals have gone through, and you can say situation interview, but if you can understand the situation that people have gone through, you will be able to figure out what attitude is all about, or what they have demonstrated as attitude, and what they've used, or how they've got ahead in life, or how they've countered a situation. And to me, that's the most compelling story.
Okay. I don't know, whether it's a follow-up question or it's a very different question. I've seen attitude, definitely changing a lot of things. If you have a colleague who's very proactive, who's and it's up to person as well. How much HRs or CHROs or talent acquisition folks are associated with main business line? Or do you think or are things changing right now in this world? Because if I look back 7-8 years back, I've never seen an HR very much interested in the main business or the P&L, which we were also talking about.
I would beg to differ. I think the journey has evolved not just 5-7 years ago. I think, if I said this of maybe the 90s, probably would be true. If I said this of the 2000s, you probably would be still true. But I think in the last 15 odd years, we've come leaps and bounds.
Okay.
As a HR community, we are much closer to business. And I can tell you, if the question is, if you're asking me how many HRs, I would wish 100%. You can't build HR practices. You can't bring about HR interventions without the context of the business. It's just impossible. At some point, you have to understand where do you fit in the P&L, right? So I'm a very strong advocate of that, right? So you'll keep hearing me say that again, because I genuinely believe it from the core of my heart. Your value addition comes in when you're able to bring business and people together, right? So yes, I would want everybody, but I think we've made lots of leaps and bounds. I don't think this is a journey that started 5 years ago. I think we've progressed. Of course, we'll continue to progress, but I would say the community today has a significant amount of voice on the table than it was 20 years ago.
Very interesting. And does it translate into wealth creation as well? Because I'll tell you why. I've never heard stories. I've heard stories like this founder has made wealth, CMOs have made wealth, CFOs have made wealth, but I don't know whether this has been covered or not. And this could be a really great insight, can CHROs make wealth?
Why do we have that question? Why do we not believe that CHROs are making money? I'm not. That's a question for me to go back to my founder. But that's a message for him. But look, I mean, I don't know how to answer this one. I think it's a very personal question, right? I don't believe that CHROs haven't made money. And to me, that's a measure of nothing, whether they have or they have not, right? But the ability to run an organization that's 160 billion or a 60 billion organization or an organization that has over 300,000 employees in the country, or an organization that's been in existence and transformed itself from selling soaps to doing IT and leading that organization through those transformative journeys. Those are accomplishment and wealth in its own sort.
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't really measure success just in terms of money. Of course, all of us are here to make money, give ourselves a good life. And that's not bad. That's good. But to me, that's not really a measure of any sorts. It's just function. There are many people from the HR community who've gone on to become founders and made myths, but the roles are different. I mean, I don't know if I answered that question.
I think you fairly answered, because I think it's
by the way, I know a lot of rich CHROs.
Can you name them?
Really not the one that's in this conversation, but yes.
No, absolutely. I think what you answer, and it's very person to person how they define success, how they define wealth. And if people have seen progressions, people have seen transformations, and people were really proud of their work, that's also somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be altruistic about this. Look, as I said, money is important, right? But it's absolutely unfair to believe and assume that if the organization has grown and made money, if the CEO has grown and made money, if the CMO has grown and made money, the HR would not have. That's the point that I'm trying to make. It's a team sport. Building an organization is not an individual CEO/founder's role. It comes together only when your team comes together.
But tell me one thing, Vikrant, and this is a very honest, why these stories are not coming out? Because I think we have always seen a lot of stories coming out of wealth creation for all of these folks.
You're going to ask the PR person in you to figure out why these stories don't make the headline.
Okay, I think the first story we have it here, guys.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know if how to answer this question. I don't know. I think traditionally HR has been a behind-the-scene function. It's more of an enabling, stitching together of an organization kind of a function, bring things together, bring people together. Usually the face of the organization is the CEO, and rightfully so. CEO, he or she does carry the entire burden of the organization, the responsibilities of the organization. So it's also absolutely natural for them to be the face of the organization and represent the firm. So maybe that's the reason, but I think best asked as I said, the PR person in you.
I'll ignore that. But I think I really don't know, and this just popped up in my mind, and I just thought of asking you.
But promise me,
yeah,
once this message goes to my founder and I make wealth, you'll cover me. Fair?
For sure, if I'm getting a cut. I think one last question, or maybe one or two more questions I'll ask you. One advice that you would like to give to a 20-year-old who's just joining the HR function?
20-year-old joining the HR function. Interesting. I think functionally or professionally, I would tell them, move around and see different parts of HR. Of course, there are folks that want to be a recruiter for the life. That's well respected. I believe there's space for there. There are folks that want to be comp and ben people all their life, and they love L&D and want to be L&D people all their life. I am a huge advocate of that. If that's what you love, do it. But if you're starting your career, I would say go around the HR function. Why HR function? I would say put your hand up and go sell. If you're joining MRF, go sell tires, right? The more exposure you get, the more you have the ability to join the dots, make the connections, right? What would happen if I'm doing this? If I move this, what will happen? Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes just gets amplified multiple times. So I would generally advise is get yourself a little bit of exposure before you decide to settle down in one function, sub-function. So if it's HR person, go out, do a business role, even if it's for 3 months, do various aspects of HR, then come back into the line that you love. That would be my advice.
I think it's a very interesting point of view that you have shared. Grant, I think I would want to learn a lot, and I think people who are watching would want to know every bits and piece from your career as well. I'll just name the organizations you have been part of, and if you can tell me one thing that you learned there.
Oh, wow.
And I think it'll be very interesting to know as well.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the first organization, L&T.
HR processes in depth.
Okay. Nike.
You should be paranoid about your brand.
Wow. Okay. That's coming from an HR is very interesting. Accenture.
Actually, a lot of my growth really happened, evolution happened in Accenture. But I would say one big thing is stakeholder management.
Okay. HCL.
What I learned in HCL is how do you build businesses ground up?
Very interesting. Harman.
How do you lead by influence?
Okay. Apna.
Still learning. But I think what I've learned at Apna is you will fail. You will fail. And it's not important what did you fail in or how hard and how big did you fail, but you will fail. The question is, are you ready to get up and run? The question is, do you have energy to pull through 600 other people and make them believe that we are going to run again and run on the vision that we've set ourselves? Of course, we'll have stumbling blocks. I think that's been my biggest learning.
That's very interesting because I really relate to this, and because being from a marketing function, and this is something which was told to me on day one by Nirmit only, we'll do 100 experiments and we'll fail in 99 experiments.
Yeah.
And we are not sure that one experiment will also fly or not. So I can so much relate to this. I think one last question, and this is something, you've always worked in corporates.
Mm-hmm.
You've always worked in very organized format.
Mm-hmm.
How does it feel to work in a startup?
Well, first I want to, break this myth. Well, Apna is also a corporate.
Okay.
It is also a corporate. It is the fastest unicorn was the fastest unicorn ever in the country. So it is legendary of that shot. Of course, we still have to accomplish and achieve a whole lot of our vision and our journey is out there for us. I don't find any difference,
Okay.
right? And I'll tell you why. One of the key skills that I think HR people or everybody technically in this world should have is adaptability, right? It's not like performance management is done differently. It's still performance management. Of course, there were SMART goals and there were OKRs and there were KPIs and there are various other jargons. But at the end of the day, you're measuring what the individual has done objectively and giving him or her feedback. Baki sab is a lot of packaging, new word is my personal belief. So I think if you're able to adapt and bring your application of HR from an HR perspective, it works everywhere. I can tell you every organization that I work is super different. L&T is very different from Nike, right? Nike and Accenture are chalk and cheese. Of course, two big brands, but the businesses are different, the pace is different, the work is different, right? HCL and Harman were very different, right? IT services to consumers and manufacturing, product engineering and services in some parts of it, right? So every organization has its own vibe, own culture, own nuances, right? The beauty is, are you able to adapt to each of these? And I think that's one thing that I would also advise all HR people to do is being able to adapt themselves. But I think I've had as much as fun at Apna here in the last year and a half, two that I've been here, as much as I've had in my, let's say, 10 years at Accenture or 5 years with Harman. So no discredit to the startup ecosystem.
So this really inspires me. I was thinking it was enough for me, but I think I can spend more time at Apna.
Well, of course, it has its challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the one thing that I would advise, since we're having this conversation, is be ready. It's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
If you don't have the stomach for it, get off the ride. But if you want to enjoy the ride, then don't complain.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vikrant. I think you answered all my queries, questions and everything. And thank you so much for doing this on a Friday night.
Thank you so much. Clearly, not the best time, Friday night. But thank you so much for taking the time. It was fun chatting up with you, and I hope this is enjoyable for the folks that at some point get to listen to this.
And I hope you know that from the next episode, you are in my chair and you would be interviewing other CHROs as well.
But I'm making a point that it's not going to be on a Friday night. Definitely not at 9:30. But we'll figure this out.
Absolutely.
But so good for having initiated this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Loved it.
Yeah. Thank you.